Hey, everybody. I am just going to jump into reading this. What I wanted to talk about today is a kind of misconception that a lot of people have in all kinds of different traditions. Usually, you'll hear people refer to it as ego death. You read about it and you hear about it all the time now. Pops up in all different kinds of places. But that's the misperception or the misconception or the misunderstanding, however you want to talk about it, phrase it, that I want to cover here. And I'm going to read you a piece that I've been working on about Zen, alchemy, and ego death. So I'm just going to jump right into it. One of the most damaging misunderstandings in modern spirituality is the belief that the goal of the practice, whether it's Zen, whether it's alchemy, or whatever, is the complete annihilation of the ego. People talk about ego death as if it's some like kind of heroic finish line or some grand ritual immolation where the small self gets burned to ash and they emerge enlightened, pure, and untouched. But the truth is that neither Zen nor alchemy teach this. In fact, both traditions say exactly the opposite. What Zen and alchemy both teach is that the ego does not die. What dies is our identification with the ego. See, this sounds like a really subtle distinction, like almost a, semantics, but the entire spiritual path rests on this. Mistake one for the other, and you can spend years trying to kill the very tool that you need to navigate in the world. Confuse the map for the territory, and you end up chasing hallucinations. The ego is not the enemy. The ego is not some kind of demon to be executed. What it is the mistaken belief that we are the ego that binds us. That's what blinds us. That's what keeps us from the truth of what we actually are. Zen doesn't teach ego annihilation. Zen teaches seeing through the illusion of self, not killing it off. And alchemy, for all the imagery it uses of things like fire and dissolution and transformation, it doesn't tell us to destroy the ego. What it tells us, what it teaches us how to do, is to refine it. Alchemy refines, it distills, it purifies, it removes what is false until only the essential remains. It doesn't say destroy the flask, it says clean it, strengthen it, make it worthy of the gold that it holds. The ego is the flask, it's the vessel. Awareness is the gold. When I talk about things like presence or about the true nature that lies beneath thought, I'm not pointing towards what people think of as self-annihilation. What I'm pointing towards is a kind of recognition. There's a field of awareness beneath the mind, beneath the thinking process, beneath things like our memory and our identity. That field is always here. It predates the mind. It remains long after our individual thoughts dissolve. In Zen, you hear it referred to as our true face before we were born. Alchemy calls it the divine spark, the inner light, or the philosopher's gold. Whatever the name, it's the same thing. The simple fact of awareness itself. What dies on this path is not the ego, it's our confusion. It's the belief that the stream of thoughts passing through awareness is who we are. It's the instinct to cling to every fear, every impulse, every story, every trauma, and self-image as if they are the bedrock of our existence. Liberation is not the obliteration of the mind. Liberation is realizing the mind has never been you. It's not what you are. It's not who you are. This is why the moment of awakening often feels like falling backwards into an immense quiet space that you've somehow missed your entire life. You see that awareness remains even when thought stops. You see that thoughts arise from this space and they also dissolve back into it. You notice things like emotions, they come and go. Sensations come and go. Identities come and go. But there's something that does not come and go. That unmoving background, that's the real you. That's what you really are. You are what lies behind the mind, what Zen calls the ground from which the mind arises. It's what alchemy calls the first matter. When identification collapses, the ego is dethroned, but it's not eliminated. It simply returns to what it was always supposed to be, a tool that we can use, but that no longer uses us. People think enlightenment, it turns you into like some kind of blank, droning husk who no longer thinks or feels or participates in the world. They imagine an enlightened being as someone who has surgically removed the ego like an organ that has gone bad. But look at people like the Zen patriarchs, the great alchemists, even the sword saints, people like Musashi. All the hermits, the adepts, all of them had personalities. They laughed, they argued, they ate meals, they wrote books, they used language, they made decisions, they taught students, they chose one action over another. None of those things would be possible without an ego that functions properly. The ego is what lets you distinguish a door from a brick wall. It's what lets you navigate a conversation or decide what to do next with your life. It's the interface between awareness and the world of form. You need it in order to function. You need it just to communicate. You need it to survive long enough to practice. The difference, though, is that after awakening, the ego is not the driver anymore. It's the tool you use, but not the identity that you believe yourself to be. Before awakening, the ego is like a child steering a car while you're locked up in the back seat somewhere. After awakening, you're behind the wheel again, and the ego becomes one of the controls on the dashboard, something you use when you need it, something you ignore when you don't. It doesn't really make life easier, but it makes life clearer. Both Zen and alchemy emphasize, although they express it in different ways, that awakening is just the beginning. The moment that you realize you're not the ego, that marks the end of one delusion, but it's also the starting point of the real great work. Enlightenment is not retirement. Enlightenment is conscription. Zen talks about things like polishing the mirror. Alchemy describes the continuous refinement of the vessel. The book of Abramelin speaks of binding the demons. These are all metaphors for the same stage of the path, training the ego so that it becomes a fit container for the divine essence that you've discovered. When you stop identifying with the ego, you see its impulses, fears, traumas, and habits for what they truly are, unrefined forces that pull you off center. Zen calls these obscurations. Alchemy calls them impurities. Abramelin, the book of Abramelin the Mage, calls them demons. But they're not talking about supernatural creatures. These are the untrained aspects of the psyche. They were running your life before. Now they have to be bound, disciplined, and purified so that they can serve the highest part of you instead of sabotaging it. This is why training never ends. The Buddha didn't reach enlightenment and stop meditating. He continued his training for the rest of his life. Awakening is the moment of seeing. Practice is the ongoing process of shaping what you saw into how you live. People imagine enlightenment as a kind of finish line, but the enlightened are always training, always refining, always returning to presence. They're not refining awareness, they're refining the ego that awareness must move through. They're strengthening the vessel so that it can channel more light. more clarity, more compassion, more discipline, more power without breaking or cracking. This is why the great Zen masters were often strict, disciplined, and precise. They weren't trying to kill the ego. They were tempering it. They were shaping it into something that could carry the weight of awareness without collapsing under its intensity. In alchemy, the work isn't done when you discover what your true nature is. It's done when every part of you, your body, your mind, your ego, your emotions, your instincts, when they all become aligned with your true nature. The baseline realization that I'm not the ego is not the magnum opus. It's the spark that begins the magnum opus, the great work. The ego after awakening is not destroyed. It's reconstituted. You dissolve identification through presence. You separate what is false from what's true. You refine the residue through discipline, through presence, and through practice. You reintegrate the purified parts into a higher unity. You bind what once controlled you. You illuminate what once hid in shadow. And you shape what once shaped you. Eventually, what happens is the ego becomes transparent, not absent, not erased, not obliterated. It becomes a crystal clear vessel that allows the divine essence, the awareness that you actually are, to shine through it without distortion. This is the aim of both Zen and alchemy. Not ego death, but ego transformation. Not annihilation, but refinement. Not escape from the world, but clarity, even as you move through the midst of it. If you strip these traditions down to their bones, the message is simple. What the message of both Zen and alchemy are or is number one, you are not the mind. You are not your thoughts. You're not the ego. What you are is the awareness that they arise within. Realizing this, experiencing this is the first step. Living from this understanding is the path. Refining all the parts of you so that they align, this is the great work. Ego death is a myth. What dies is your confusion. What dies is your identification with a temporary structure. What dies is the lie that you've been living under since the day you were born. The ego survives, but it no longer rules. Now it serves like a tool. And because of that, the work will continue for the rest of your life. Training never ends. Not because you're broken in some way, but because you're being shaped. Not because you're deficient, but because you're being sculpted into something capable of carrying the light that you've uncovered. There is no finish line. Presence deepens endlessly. Refinement never stops. Awareness expands without limit. And the ego, like any good tool, becomes more precise the more that you consciously use it. This is the real teaching. This is the actual path. This is what Zen and alchemy have both been pointing to all along. And I just want to end this by saying thank you. Thank you guys for supporting me. Thank you for reading my books, listening to my talks, coming to the events that I do. I don't take your support or your presence in my life for granted. I appreciate it very, very much. That being said, if this sort of work speaks to you, if you want more, if you want to go more in depth with these sort of things, I will post a link in the comments to my Patreon where I do these kinds of videos and writings and live streams and talks all the time, and you can join me. And I even have the comments turned on in there so that it's more like a back and forth dialogue. You can ask questions about things you don't understand, and I'll do my best to clarify. I also have a retreat coming up that I will tell you about soon called The Way of the Sword. What we are going to be focused on for several days as we live together and practice together is embodied presence. And we're going to do it in two main forms. One, we are going to be doing a lot of sitting meditation, a very particular meditation called Shikantaza. I would recommend looking it up if you've never heard of it. Shikantaza. The other thing we will be doing, which I am very excited about and which I am very passionate about, is sword training. Not sword training particularly for combat, but we are going to be focused on it as a mode of moving meditation. And I'll post links to it everywhere very soon, probably the 1st of December. It's going to be in Rhinebeck, New York at the Omega Center. That being said, like I was just saying, thank you guys so much. And hopefully I will talk to you again very soon. Have a good holiday season, and thank you. Bye-bye.